mentioned, GovCloud fundamentally, it's just a region, right? But it is a region that we built for a specific subset of customers that had more stringent compliance and regulatory requirements and sensitive data and workloads. So customers that wanted to take advantage of the AWS cloud, but to do so in a fashion that still maintain their compliance against any government regulations or more stringent compliance requirements they had that may have prohibited them from using some of our other regions on our platform. We built and launched the region in August of 2011 with a core US government customer in mind. And NASA JPL, as Teresa mentioned this morning, was one of the primary drivers. But we also recognized that there were a number of government agencies across the federal government, as well as state and local governments, that also had more additional requirements in terms of compliance that may have prevented them from leveraging our other regions, specifically those regions in the US. So we embarked upon building what then became AWS GovCloud US with a core focus on compliance, right? So how do we help government agencies adopt cloud while still maintaining their compliance? And we'll spend some time here in a few slides talking about some of the more specific compliance features of GovCloud. But we looked at it not just to adhere to things like ITAR, which is the US government's international traffic and arms regulation, mainly focused on export control for defense and military related data and information. But we looked out on the horizon and recognized that whether it was FedRAMP or some of the requirements from DISA, or some of the requirements from our Department of Justice customers, right? We needed to build a region that met all of those requirements to allow those customers to maintain their compliance while leveraging the cloud. Now, as I mentioned, GovCloud is a region, right? But there are a number of individual characteristics and features of GovCloud that distinguish it from all of our other regions, to include our other US regions. One of the foundational elements that is relatively unique to GovCloud is the fact that, as I mentioned on the previous slide, it is an isolated region. And what that means is, from the standpoint of physical and logical isolation, we provide data, network, and machine separation from all of our other regions on our platform to include our other US regions. And what that typically materializes in for customers that use AWS today is, if you log into our management console, you'll notice in the top right-hand corner there's this section that's called a region selector. It's a little drop-down, you click it, and it'll give you a list of regions that you can select to deploy your workloads or host your data. For those of you who use AWS today, you will notice that GovCloud does not show up in that list. And the fundamental reason why it doesn't is because of the isolation that's unique to GovCloud. So when we looked at meeting some of the more stringent requirements that our customers had in the government, we recognized that we needed a region that gave customers the ability to maintain compliance in a relatively isolated and segmented manner so that they didn't violate any export control regulations or violate any of their compliance requirements from a US federal government perspective. Beyond that isolation, we also went a step further. And for all customers or partners that are qualified to access GovCloud, you'll get a separate, unique set of credentials that you will use to access the region. In addition to the isolation, we wanted to ensure that customers could further segment and restrict access to their more sensitive environments, typically those environments and workloads that are hosted in the GovCloud region. And then beyond just the isolation and the separate credentials, we also built a standalone management console for GovCloud. It looks, smells, feels, operates just like the standard management console for the traditional AWS platform, but it only works and interacts with the GovCloud region. So when you get those unique credentials and you log into your GovCloud management console, right, you can't interact with any other region. When you're deploying those workloads and building those applications and running those applications in GovCloud, via the management console, you're only interacting with those resources and apps in the region. One of the other fundamental differences with GovCloud is it is a region that is fully managed by AWS personnel that are US persons on US soil. That becomes vitally important for our customers that have to deal with regulations such as ITAR or CGIS, right, or some of the DoD requirements that necessitate US persons only access. So from an AWS perspective, that means not just our data center engineers and our data center operators, but our support teams, our service teams, and any of the system engineers that support the GovCloud region are all U.S. persons on U.S. soil. And then beyond the U.S. persons element, we typically hear from customers that they refer to GovCloud as our community cloud. And the reason for that is because there's a separate process that all customers have to go through when they request access to the GovCloud region. There's a separate vetting and validation process that we conduct on the back end. All customers have to adhere to the terms and conditions of use of GovCloud. And assuming that they pass that validation and verification, right, because we control who gets access to the region, many customers and many partners refer to GovCloud as our community cloud with vetted account holders. So we don't just let anybody in, right? You have to pass a certain set of criteria before you get in, and assuming you meet those requirements and you're in either a government agency or an organization in a regulated industry, we will then let you have access to GovCloud. But it's important to note that because of that stage gate to vet customers, you will hear a lot of folks refer to GovCloud as our community cloud region. So what are those requirements? 3 fundamental requirements for all users of GovCloud, regardless of if you're a government agency or a defense contractor or a government contractor or a technology firm that wants to offer solutions in the region. First requirement, the account holder, i.e. the person that's actually requesting access to GovCloud, must be a U.S. person. And by U.S. person, we define that as either a U.S. citizen or a green card holder. The second requirement is that that person must either work for a U.S. government agency or an organization that is incorporated to do business in the U.S. and physically located on U.S. soil. So 2 kind of cornerstone requirements, regardless of the organization or the person requesting access, is U.S. person working for a U.S. entity on U.S. soil. And then finally, both the person and the organization that that person works for cannot be barred from handling export control data as determined by the U.S. State Department. Part of the validation and vetting that we do on the back end is we ensure that all account holders or all users requesting access to GovCloud does not have any violations on file with the U.S. State Department for export control. That is non-negotiable. So as part of our validation and verification process when we onboard customers to the region, we will run that check. And if we do find violations, we will stop the process and prohibit access to GovCloud. That applies regardless of if you're going to actually use GovCloud for export control or ITAR workloads or not. It's a fundamental requirement for access to the region, and any customers that have violations will be prohibited from accessing GovCloud. So as I mentioned in one of the opening charts, GovCloud is fundamentally all about compliance in the cloud, right? It's not necessarily about security because all of our regions across the globe use the same security architecture. They're all secure. But in certain cases, our customers have unique requirements in terms of compliance that GovCloud allows them to address beyond our other regions, to include our other U.S. regions. Whether it's FedRAMP requirements, or as we discussed, ITAR requirements in terms of export control. If you're a defense contractor or an agency in the DoD and you have to adhere to the DoD Cloud Security Requirements Guide. If you're in the law enforcement and public safety market, either working for a government agency or one of the many technology solution providers that support the law enforcement sector, if you have to meet CJIS requirements, which is the Criminal Justice Information Service Security Policy as managed by the Department of the Department of Justice, any of those more stringent requirements that have more specific requirements in terms of how organizations must adhere to those policies are using GovCloud to host those sensitive data and those sensitive workloads. We also have features to allow customers to maintain compliance with additional U.S. government requirements around things like FIPS 140-2. So if you're supporting a workload that requires FIPS compliance, GovCloud is the region that allows you to maintain that FIPS 140-2 compliance while hosting those workloads in the region. Beyond those, which are unique to GovCloud, GovCloud also has all of the same requirements in terms of features for compliance as our other U.S. regions. So if you're in the healthcare industry, working for a government organization, a research institution, or a private sector company that has to adhere to HIPAA, GovCloud has HIPAA compliance as well. All of the ISO compliance and the SOC compliance that our other regions have applies to GovCloud as well, right? So this is why we fundamentally say it's for customers that have to meet that additional bar in terms of DoD export control, CGIS, or FIPS compliance, where they want to host those workloads in the cloud, but still ensure that they maintain compliance with their stakeholders. Now, specifically to the government, we also support organizations and agencies that have to meet the NIST requirements. So if you are building a system for the U.S. government or you're a U.S. government agency and you have to meet the NIST Special Publication 800-53 requirement, we support those in GovCloud as well. If you're a government contractor, or defense contractor, and you have to meet NIST Special Publication 800-171 in your own data centers, we also support that as well. Specifically for those organizations that are hosting unclassified yet sensitive data, and they want to do that in a highly compliant manner while using the cloud, we support both of those special publications from NIST with the AWS GovCloud US region as well. And because of that, we have many customers that use our platform to host controlled unclassified information, or CUI data for short. We have organizations hosting workloads that involve not just export control, but law enforcement public safety data, statistical data, financial information, PII data, data and applications and workloads that deal with U.S. government critical infrastructure, financial information, privacy data, the whole host of data and information that spans the 16 categories of CUI as defined by the U.S. federal government, mainly because of our ability to support things like NIST 800-171 in the GovCloud region. What we typically like to do before we dive into use cases and customers is also take a minute to give background on GovCloud, right, and how we've evolved since we launched the region in August of 2011. So when we launched originally, we only launched GovCloud with a handful of services, typically the kind of the core services that most of our customers need as they start onboarding and leveraging the cloud. Right, so we launched in 2011 with services like our core compute service, which is EC2. We included our object store service, which is S3. We launched with EBS, VPC, which is our virtual private cloud, and our identity and access management service, which all is about authentication and access control to your resources on AWS. From 2011 into 2012, we then started bringing on some of the more advanced services and features and embracing some of the automation capabilities that are pretty germane to the platform today, but things like elastic load balancing and auto scaling. And then we brought in our fully managed relational database service, which is Amazon RDS in 2012 as well. We continued with that evolution in 2013, bringing in services like our fully managed NoSQL database, which is Amazon DynamoDB. We also brought in our hosted Hadoop framework, which is Amazon Elastic MapReduce, or EMR for short. And then we launched our management console in 2013 as well. So when GovCloud first launched, it only supported command line interface interaction. And we got a lot of feedback from our customers that they wanted the GUI element of AWS to manage their resources in GovCloud as well. So in 2013, we did launch that dedicated management console for AWS GovCloud US. And then we continued on with that innovation in 2014, bringing in services like our fully managed data warehouse, Amazon Redshift. We brought in a lot of the second generation EC2 compute families. And we continued with things like our long-term archival data storage capability, which is Amazon Glacier. And then something unique happened right around the end of 2014 and all through 2015, where we really ramped up the pace of service and feature launches in the GovCloud region. And if you look at this chart, you'll notice that we actually launched more services and features in GovCloud in 2015 than we did in the prior 4 years since launch. And we brought out not just core services, but some of our advanced services as well. So things like our in-memory database service, Elasticache. We focused on bringing in a lot of security, compliance, and governance-related services. So things like the AWS Key Management Service, our Cloud HSM service, as well as we integrated the VPC integration with S3 for customers that wanted that additional level of security while storing their data objects in the S3 service. We also implemented things like VPC flow logs, which helps you monitor network traffic within your VPC. We launched some of our next generation instances like D2 instances, which are storage dense instances for organizations that require those type of compute families. So across the board, when you look at that rollout, we really did accelerate that pace. And we're continuing along in that same manner this year in 2016, where we've already launched more than 10 significant services and features year to date in GovCloud today. And when you look at that ramp, not just from 2014 through 2015 into 2016, but when you look at what we've done year to date and what we're going to do for the rest of this year, it all lends to a simple fact that our customers, both in terms of end customers and partners, are really starting to increase their adoption of not just cloud, but AWS GovCloud. Teresa talked this morning about the growth of our GovCloud region since inception, where we've really literally realized 221% year-over-year growth since 2011. And there's a direct correlation between that growth and the pace at which we've been launching services and features in the GovCloud region, right? As our customers have grown, as they've matured their workloads, as they've expanded the types of workloads they're hosting in GovCloud, they give us feedback, and our roadmap is driven 100% by our customers and partners. So as those customers increase their usage, they had requirements, they had different features they needed to implement some of their workloads on the AWS GovCloud platform, and we responded to that by increasing our pace of evolution in terms of service and feature adoption. But that correlates one-to-one exactly with the growth of the region since launch. And as I mentioned, we fundamentally built GovCloud for a core U.S. government customer when we launched it in August of 2011. And not just federal government. We recognized that many state and local governments also had some of the same requirements that our federal government customers had. But as you look at that growth from 2011 to 2015, a lot of that growth is also coming from organizations and organizations and industries such as some of our highly regulated government industries like aerospace, defense, manufacturing, and technologies. We have organizations that are using GovCloud that are education institutes, mainly doing research on behalf of a lot of government agencies. We have many research organizations proper that are also leveraging GovCloud. We have a whole ecosystem of consulting firms and system integrators that are also using GovCloud, not just to deliver solutions and capabilities to their end customers, but as they look at leveraging cloud for some of their internal corporate IT infrastructure, specifically those that have to adhere to the NIST 800-171 publication, a lot of those organizations are also turning to GovCloud to host their more sensitive data and workloads while remaining compliant in the cloud. Technology firms and software vendors. So again, as our customer base has grown in GovCloud, a lot of software companies that support those customers are onboarding more and more solutions to the GovCloud region. We'll talk about some of those firms here in a second. But whether it's software products that are deployed in a traditional manner or platform or SaaS applications, a lot of technology vendors are also contributing to that growth as they offer those solutions to our customers that use GovCloud. And then finally, managed service providers, right? So for any organization that provides a managed service to end customers, specifically customers in the government, also contributing to our growth over the years as they offer those fully managed capabilities to customers that still have to maintain their compliance while leveraging the cloud. And the common thread amongst all those organizations across the different sectors and industries is that they all have sensitive data, right? They all have strict compliance requirements and regulatory requirements they have to meet, right? Many of them prefer the vetted community cloud platform that GovCloud is, and they want all of those things on a cloud platform that is robust, innovative, scalable, and agile. So they want those top three features on AWS, which is typically what brings them to our GovCloud region. Now, I mentioned partners, and across the board at AWS, we have a very robust and growing partner ecosystem. And the same thing applies to GovCloud, right? So some of the leading consulting and system integrator companies also support customers in the GovCloud region. Firms like Booz Allen Hamilton and CSRA, organizations such as Smartronix and DLT Solutions and Atoma Technologies, right? So a whole portfolio of solutions around what these companies offer to government customers or organizations in regulated IT industries that need the expertise of AWS, but also for their workloads in the GovCloud region. The same thing applies to our technology partners. So again, a whole portfolio of organizations that are offering innovative solutions specifically in the GovCloud region. So whether it's a managed document management, content management solutions from Adobe, or security governance related solutions from Splunk or Barracuda Networks, or ERP systems from SAP, or fully managed Spark-based big data analytics solutions such as those from Databricks. We have a whole robust set of partners that are increasingly building solutions to help our customers deploy their workloads in the GovCloud region. And as Teresa Carlson mentioned earlier today, we just announced our AWS GovCloud US skill program. So for any of you in the audience that either works for a consulting firm or a system integrator or a technology firm or software vendor, this program is specifically focused on identifying vetted partners from the consulting side that either have expertise in architecting, migrating, managing, deploying workloads specific to GovCloud, and for technology solutions providers that are vetted, that offer secure solutions for our customers that have to meet their additional compliance and regulatory requirements in the GovCloud region. So definitely visit our GovCloud homepage, aws.amazon.com/GovCloud-US to learn more about the skill program. But we're pretty excited about it because as another example of us responding to customer needs, the genesis of that program came from our customers asking us for consulting firms and system integrators and technology firms that had expertise in GovCloud, right? So we're going to help the customers better identify those firms that do have that expertise unique to GovCloud. And then in terms of what those partners are helping our customers implement in GovCloud, the workloads have really grown in terms of the number of workloads and the breadth of workloads that these customers are implementing on GovCloud. Many customers, right, if they leverage our general platform, they want to do the same things in GovCloud. So whether it's hosting things like websites or web applications, or using GovCloud for archiving, disaster recovery, long-term storage workloads, if they're not only hosting production capabilities, but also doing their dev test. So they have dev test environments that they spin up and run in GovCloud. Increasingly, many more customers are starting to use GovCloud for their business and mission-oriented applications as well. We have organizations that use GovCloud for their internal enterprise IT infrastructure. We have some customers, especially those that embrace cloud early, that are now starting to do more advanced workloads in GovCloud, right? So whether it's high-performance compute with sensitive data or big data analytics with sensitive data or regulated data, our workloads in terms of the breadth of what customers are doing on the platform are increasing. We also have a whole host of customers that are now implementing mobile-based solutions in GovCloud as well, which is a pretty interesting use case because if you're a company or an organization that has embraced mobile and you're integrating mobile into your overall IT fabric, but you need mobile in an ITAR or CGIS or FedRAMP compliant manner, we have a whole host of customers and partners that are now implementing mobile-based solutions fully hosted out of the AWS GovCloud US region. We have two sessions coming up today, later this evening, where two specific customers are going to dive deep into their use of GovCloud and talk about their use case. So at 3:45, we're going to have the U.S. Army, in tandem with one of our partners, HP Enterprise, talk about the migration of a fairly large-scale U.S. Army application to AWS GovCloud. So they'll talk about how they had to meet ITAR compliance, DoD SRG compliance and things of that nature for a mission-critical application. So definitely check that out if you can. And then at 4:45, immediately following the U.S. Army presentation, we're going to have the CIO for CSRA come up and talk about their all-in migration to AWS, specifically leveraging AWS GovCloud for their sensitive data and workloads. For any of you that were at AWS reInvent last year, you saw part one of this. But now we're going to come back with part two and dive a little bit more deeper into that particular use case and explain how CSRA not only executed the migration, but their future plans for how they're going to continue to leverage AWS GovCloud for their internal corporate IT needs. So how do you get started? So typically, what we recommend to customers is that when they feel that they're ready to request access to GovCloud, they create a new AWS account to use as the basis for requesting access to GovCloud. So all GovCloud accounts are linked one-to-one with a standard account. And as a best practice to help customers segment their workloads, specifically those sensitive workloads that will go into GovCloud, we typically recommend customers to create a new standard account to use that as the basis for requesting access to GovCloud. Once you create that new account, you can actually request access to GovCloud in a self-service manner. So you log into that standard account using root credentials. You navigate to your account settings page, and as long as you're logged in as root, you will scroll down and you'll see a section that says AWS GovCloud US, and you'll see a blue button that shows up that says sign up for AWS GovCloud US. Now, clicking that button doesn't give you access to GovCloud. It just starts the process to onboard to the region. So it'll take you to a screen where you see the terms and conditions of AWS GovCloud US. You have to enter in some information. We run some initial validation and verification checks there. And once you submit it, right, we'll start the back-end validation on our process, on our end. And assuming that you pass all the verification and validation checks, you'll receive an access approved email. You get that email, you click the link in there, and it'll take you through the remaining steps to grant access to the region. So we've automated that, a lot more than what the traditional process used to be a few years ago. But for any of you in the audience that think that you need AWS GovCloud for your workloads, you can actually request access directly today via the AWS Management Console. And then one note for if you're a reseller, we do have a separate process. So if you're a reseller organization and you're going to support an end customer that needs access to AWS GovCloud, you're going to have to contact your AWS business representative or account manager, and they can submit the request on your behalf for your end customer as well. And then finally, in closing, just want to leave with a few things. So remember, GovCloud, right, region on our platform, but physically and logically isolated from all of our other regions. Separate availability zones, separate credentials, separate network data and machines that power that region, unique endpoints, and unique compliance requirements for customers that have to meet a higher bar in terms of their regulatory compliance requirements. And then as well, recognize that it's not just for the U.S. government, right? So if you're an organization, be it a government contractor or a defense contractor or organization in a government-regulated industry, you can access GovCloud as well. You still have to go through the same onboarding process and pass all the vetting and validation checks. But if you're an organization that are in any of those industries, you could definitely leverage GovCloud to meet those additional compliance requirements while leveraging the AWS Cloud Platform as well. And then finally, be sure to remember the AWS shared responsibility model. And what that basically means is while we provide you a platform that meets a number of regulations and a number of compliance requirements, it's still your responsibility to safeguard that sensitive data and those applications that are fall under the guidance of government regulations, right? So there's responsibilities on your end as well. We provide the infrastructure as a service to meet those requirements, but you're going to still have to leverage some of our services like Cloud HSM, KMS, CloudTrail, et cetera, to further control access to those environments and monitor those environments to ensure that you're continuing to meet your requirements. And then finally, if you want to learn more about GovCloud, as I mentioned earlier, visit our webpage at aws.amazon.com. .com/GovCloud-US. It's all the information on the region, which services are in the region, how to get started. There's a link to the instructions for requesting access. There's also a link on that page to the AWS GovCloud US skill program that was announced today. So for any partners in the audience that want to partake in that type of program, you can kick off the process and at least see the criteria required to be a part of that program. And then finally, you will also see a link on that page to our AWS GovCloud US User's Guide. That User's Guide is essentially a more detailed document that talks about the services in the region, the features of those services. For those of you that have to maintain ITAR compliance, it also talks about the ITAR boundaries of those services, letting you know which services are appropriate for storing ITAR data and which ones are not. And then finally, my information is on the slide here. If you have any questions about AWS GovCloud for your sensitive data and sensitive workloads, feel free to reach out to me or the GovCloud team, and we are happy to get you guys squared away. So with that, I will wrap up the presentation and open it up for Q&A. Thank you guys for coming today. Any questions? Yes. So there's a mic right there if you want to. Okay, all right.
So is the root account for the non-GovCloud the same root account for the GovCloud regions?
No. So you will, when you request access to GovCloud, the requirement to log in with your root for the standard account is just so that you can get access to the button to request access. But you will have a separate root, separate IAM credentials once you get access to GovCloud. And the credentials from your standard account will not work in GovCloud, and vice versa. Your GovCloud credentials will not work in your standard account. But it is separate credentials. Yes? I'm sorry, I had a hard time hearing. Can you repeat it? A list of databases that we use to vet organizations? Nothing that we provide. So we use the U.S. State Department for our verification and validation. I'm not sure which of those databases they publicly expose to, organizations to use, but we use them for all of our vetting and validation. So you would have to work with the State Department to see which ones they can have access to. Yes?
For databases, within the RDS offering within GovCloud, does it offer Oracle as well as the Oracle RAC feature?
So right now we support Oracle, MySQL, SQL Server. We don't support RAC, but we can talk about that afterwards to see what your requirements are for RAC. Because again, one of the things that drives our roadmaps, literally 90% of our roadmaps are partner and customer driven, right? And we're very deliberate in making sure we understand what the needs are for our customers. So if Oracle RAC is something that you're interested in, definitely come talk to me. We can discuss that. There was a question over here.
You mentioned that do you always have to have a contract with the government to maintain?
No, so
Do you lose access to GovCloud?
no, so access to GovCloud is independent of any contract that an organization has with the U.S. government. What typically happens, though, especially for resellers, if you have a government contract and for some reason, right, the government awards that contract to a new vendor, they may require you to provide access via the credentials to that existing GovCloud account to the contract that has now taken over for that contract. But that is solely between the organization and their government agency. We're not involved in like that negotiation. But we don't shut your GovCloud account down if you lose a contract. We don't monitor that. Yes, in the front. I was waiting for that. So we are still looking at the requirements, right? Because it's definitely something that customers ask for. But typically, when we really dive into what they're really asking for in terms of what are the real requirements, most of them are really asking for high availability, which you can achieve today, right? There are certain cases where to meet mileage requirements for government RFPs and things like that, we're looking at the possibility of another region. But we don't have any committed plans today for a second GovCloud region.
So does that meet the disaster recovery requirements?
We have customers today that are hosting business and mission critical applications in GovCloud meeting DR requirements, yes. There was one other question here, yes.
Yeah, how closely synchronized are code bases between GovCloud and regular Amazon Web Services? Like, how confident can I be that if I transfer my code base from one to the other, that I'll run exactly the same?
So in terms of like services and features of the region, yeah. Yeah, so we strive for what we call pragmatic parity in GovCloud, which means we typically launch services and features in the region that we know our customers require, right? And the fundamental reason for that is because all of our service teams, they basically control their roadmaps, right? And we only want to launch services that customers need. So typically what you'll see is anywhere from a 3 to 9 month lag in terms of services that are deployed to GovCloud that are in other regions. But there are cases where if our customers say, you know, we absolutely need X, right, and we have those conversations and we ensure that there are no lower level interdependencies that we need to address, we work to get those services and features in as soon as possible. There's actually, if you go to aws.amazon.com and click on global infrastructure, there's a link that says services available by region. And it lists the Americas regions, the European regions, and the Asia Pacific regions. And it'll actually show you service by service, which services are in GovCloud, which are in US East, which are in US West, et cetera. But as a rule of thumb, we strive to make sure any service that's security, governance, or compliance related is deployed as soon as we can get it in. Just because, right, obviously GovCloud being the region for compliance-oriented customers, we want to make sure we address that. But beyond that, we really want to make sure that there's a legitimate need for services before we deploy them in the region, just because there are operational costs and things like that to run services, so we don't want services not being used. But if there are particular services that you're interested in, happy to talk to you to get those requirements. Because again, our customers really do control kind of where we go. Right here. Yes. So the FedRAMP PMO website. So they actually have the ability to look at all FedRAMP accredited infrastructure as a service providers, and it'll show you within the platform which specific services are FedRAMP compliant. I'll tell you right now, there are 6 that are compliant, not just for GovCloud, but for all of our US regions, and that is EC2, IAM, VPC, EBS, and S3. As well as Redshift. But the FedRAMP PMO, they publish which services are accredited, and we continuously work with our customers to onboard new services. So we have packages ready for additional services. So as soon as a U.S. government agency says, hey, we need RDS to be FedRAMP compliant, we'll definitely bring those in as well. But it's all driven by the U.S. government and what they need. Yes?
So I recently saw that the provisional authorization from the DoD for GovCloud, I think it's GovCloud, got extended for a 5th time.
Yes.
Do you happen to know when that's going to be a full PA? And is there a timeline on when or if AWS is even planning on doing a level 5?
So so DISA controls that. And so unfortunately, I can't disclose anything that they haven't publicly disclosed. And so it's best to direct those questions to DISA in terms of timeline. Unfortunately, I can't share, specifics on that. Sorry. I saw another hand somewhere over here. Yes. Yes.
So I saw you have the Montreal data center on your roadmap. Is there any vision for an AWS GovCloud Canada? And anybody who's currently in the U.S. who is running SAP or SAP Canada in your GovCloud instance?
So in terms of a GovCloud-like region outside of the U.S., specifically in Canada, so we have no plans on the books to do that. That doesn't mean it won't change. But your question was unique to Canada, and we don't have any commitments to build a GovCloud in outside of the U.S. And that's just not unique to Canada. That's for any other country, because Right. We built GovCloud for a very specific reason and for a very specific set of requirements. And many foreign governments, they may ask for a GovCloud, but in fact, what they're looking to build and what they're looking to use cloud for, they can achieve with our other public regions using some of the services that we offer to all customers, right? So we're very specific in making sure that we're building regions across the globe that address, whatever those government agencies' specific regulatory and compliance requirements are. That doesn't mean that in the future, if the Canadian government has something like an ITAR, maybe we will. But we don't have any specific plans right now. But we are constantly expanding our infrastructure across the globe. So that doesn't mean it won't change in the future. In terms of SAP, we do have customers running SAP and GovCloud. For privacy reasons, I can't disclose who they are, but we definitely have customers doing that inside the GovCloud region. I saw one hand over here first, but I don't see it anymore. So over to you. Yeah. Good question. So on average, a rule of thumb is GovCloud, the prices for services in GovCloud are on average about 20 to 30% higher than US East. US East being the largest region, therefore the region with the lowest prices. GovCloud is not the region with the most expensive prices, but it's not the least expensive either. We publish all of the prices for our services on our website to include in the Simply Monthly Calculator, so you can actually spec out and cost out what an environment would cost to run in GovCloud. But the general rule of thumb is for compute services, right around 20% more than US East. And for storage services, so things like S3, EBS, right around 30%. And we don't price it higher just because we want to price it higher. Those costs reflect the fact that it just fundamentally costs more to run a region like GovCloud with the unique compliance requirements, and we price the services accordingly. But it is worth noting, though, that typically when you'll see price drops in other regions, we maintain those price drops in GovCloud as well in terms of the percentages of drops. I saw another question. Yes.
Are there any platform as a service or software as a service offerings on the FedRAMP authorization program?
So we have some customers. So I'm assuming you're looking at services like Workmail, WorkDocs, like native AWS services, or are you talking about third-party applications and solutions? So there are a number of third-party software vendors that do have FedRAMP compliance solutions, some of which are hosted in GovCloud. I can't comment on the entire portfolio. It's best to check the FedRAMP office for that. In terms of our offerings, we have had some interest in services like WorkDocs and Workmail as a fully managed SaaS-ish offering, right? But native to our platform. We just haven't submitted those packages for FedRAMP accreditation yet. But again, right, we determine what we pursue FedRAMP accreditation for based on customer input, specifically in this case, U.S. government input, right? So if they have a need for a FedRAMP compliant WorkDocs service, both in GovCloud and our other U.S. regions, we'll definitely submit the package once they're ready for it. Yes. Yes. So Marketplace. So the question is the relationship between AWS GovCloud and our AWS Marketplace, which is effectively our software store for procuring software solutions from third-party vendors that are purpose-built to run on AWS. So right now, AWS Marketplace is not integrated with GovCloud. And what that basically means is, and for the region, most of the reasons is because of the isolation of GovCloud. We are looking at that. But today, if you are interested in a software product that is on Marketplace, many of those software vendors currently have those products in GovCloud. It's just you have to use them via what we call an Amazon Machine Image, which is a prepackaged image of software. So you can't leverage like the pay-as-you-go hourly pricing, but you can purchase a license from those software vendors, and they can give you access to those solutions in the GovCloud region. For any vendor that doesn't have a solution in GovCloud, I spend quite a bit of time working with software vendors to onboard more and more solutions to the region. So you can either reach out to the vendor or contact AWS directly, and we're more than happy to help you work with those software vendors to get those products in. But again, right, A good way to look at Marketplace as well is we do have some software vendors that while Marketplace isn't integrated with GovCloud, they do leverage Marketplace to market their offerings in GovCloud, right? So if you go to Marketplace and you search for GovCloud, you'll actually see some products show up and they'll say, Appian BPM for GovCloud, or you'll see a result from a company like Cisco that in the description of the Marketplace listing, it'll say, contact sales@cisco.com to learn about how to procure the offering in GovCloud. So many of those vendors support GovCloud. It's just unfortunately we don't have the one-click kind of publication feature of Marketplace yet. Any other questions? Is that a hand, or are you waving at me? No? No, okay. Well, I will give you guys about 2 minutes back. Again, thank you for attending the session today. And if you guys have any questions, feel free to give us a call. Oh, I'm sorry. One more question right here. I didn't even see it.
You talk about the GovCloud region. The question is, how many availability zones are there in GovCloud, and how many data centers? What I'm trying to get at is separation.
Yeah, so we don't publicly disclose the number of data centers, but each region is comprised of 2 or more availability zones, and those availability zones are individually comprised of 1 or more data centers. So the GovCloud region specifically is 2 AZs that customers can interact with, and each of those AZs are supported by 1 or more physical data centers, right? In terms of separation, they're all on separate floodplains, separate grids, separate fault-tolerant lines. So in terms of isolation against things like disaster recovery, we meet the same requirements in GovCloud that we do for all of our regions. And just to kind of foot stomp on that point, that's not unique to GovClouds, right? So that's every region, every availability zone on our platform, and GovCloud just shares those same characteristics. It just has a separate, dedicated set of infrastructure for the GovCloud region itself, i.e. dedicated data centers, et cetera. All right, any other questions now? Well, thanks again, guys, and if you have any questions, feel free to shoot us an email, and thanks for attending.